Good afternoon from the Philippines, Valencia, Negros Oriental. It's raining out today this afternoon. This is actually early in the rainy season, from now through October. We get the bulk of rain in this country, so we don't quite get the same summer as the United States does, although it's certainly hot and humid. But today I wanted to talk about my relatively new Caleb James Spokeshave. Now, over 20 years ago, when I first discovered wooden spokeshaves and first used one, that was the end of any interest in metal spokeshaves. The metal spokeshaves went. I should do a video on the comparison at some point, but that's not the purpose of this video. So over the years, I owned a large number of wooden spokeshaves, of which I still have 5 or 6. And traditional wood. Now, Caleb is a young maker. I want to say he's in South Carolina, but don't quote me on that. But anyway, he calls these traditional spokeshaves. And yes and no. Traditional in that they are wooden spokeshaves versus metal spokeshaves that more people are used to. But let's compare this spokeshave to what I would call traditional spokeshaves. Traditional spokeshaves come in a couple of styles. Here's a real typical one. This is a small boxwood shave, and they have tangs. And the tangs can be used to adjust the mouth opening by knocking the tang. You can push the blade out, make the mouth a little bit bigger. You can have one side a different mouth width than the other side. So you really end up with like 3 mouth widths, this side, and the center. Most spokeshaves have a slight curve, so the center has a little different opening than either side. Like most spokeshaves after years, decades, this one, if we can see, and maybe we can't, has a little indentation in the boxwood at the mouth area. So it's had enough wear over its lifetime that it's lost some of its effectiveness by having an indentation there. So this is one very traditional style of spokeshave. The other that became popular a little bit later was like this big massive marple shave with adjustment screws. And you turn these screws, which again move the blade up or down so that you can have 2, really 3 separate mouth openings. This is a really nice shave, and the adjustment screws are very sensitive. You can really adjust just a tiny bit if you want. This one might be my favorite. I think it was handmade. It's ebony. It's got sort of gull wing handles, and the screws on both sides here and here adjust, again, the blade to open and close the mouth, and it's very effective. Also, these kinds of shaves became popular in the latter part, I think, of the 19th century with a brass wear plate. Wear plate here that, solved the problem of the indentation in the wood. But it meant that you were no longer wood on wood. You were now metal on wood. So I wanted a modern shave that was wood on wood. And so I got Caleb's shave. This is an unboxing video. If it were, it comes in a really cool box that he has his logo stamped on it. But what was really impressive and hard to describe is when you open the box, the paper surrounding it, had plain paper surrounding the shave. It was folded like it was origami or something. It was the most perfectly folded paper around a tool I'd ever seen. It told me that whoever made this, let's face it, is anal. And that's good. When you want a handcrafted tool, anal is a good thing. So it was pretty remarkable just doing the layers of this paper. The tool is arguably the most comfortable, sensual, sexy tool, hand tool I've ever held in my life. And I don't even know how or why I think that. Every single place there is a different curve. There's nothing that's the same. It's all curved elegantly so that when you hold it, it's just perfect in your hand. That plus he shellacks, and I love French polishing. He French polishes his tools, and that gives it a real tactile feeling. So it's just perfect in your hand. I mean, all Spokeshaves have nice curves. You know, my Marples has a nice beefy curve. This one, as I say, has got gold wing handles, which I really like. Caleb, if you're listening, you should maybe consider that sometime. But there's nothing that I've ever held, either as a Spokeshave or any other hand tool, that has the elegant, graceful, almost sensual curves that this tool has. It's beautiful. He's got a bunch of woods that he makes them out of. This is apricot wood. And the insert, which is what I really liked, this one is Lignum Vitae. So instead of having a brass wear plate, he has a wooden wear plate. This is Lignum. The one thing, there's several things that really aren't traditional. There's no tangs here. There's no adjustment mechanism, in fact, to the blade. There's actually 2 screws that mount the blade, but they're not for adjustment. Underneath the blade, there's a couple of really tiny, I guess, set screws that you can use to adjust, but the purpose, as I understand it from the instructions, is not to change the blade for usage, but only after years, when you've you know, sharpened the blade and there's been a little bit of a change to the wear plate, that you can change the angle of the blade with the set screws underneath. But he says don't use them for changing the mouth of the blade. So how do you get different kinds of cuts? You really do it in a very traditional way. When you use a shave like this, if you rock it slightly back toward the blade itself, you can take a thick shave. I don't know if you saw that. That was a full shave. If you rock it ever so slightly forward onto the wear plate, you can now take a much finer shave. So it's really all just the angle of attack and how much pressure you want to put down as well. So again, a little back toward the blade, thick shave, a little bit forward toward the wear plate. Oops. Thinner shave. This is so much fun. It's just a spectacular tool to hold and to use. It's quickly gonna, I mean, I love my other old ones too, and I'm sure I'll continue to use them. I even have a tiny boxwood shave that somebody, I think, cut down at some point, which I use a lot on really fine, small pieces. But this shave is a perfect size for a lot of work that I do with guitar making. So, it's the Caleb James Spokeshave. If I have any complaint, and complaint is much too strong a word, I kind of wish that the insert were a little wider. It's 1/4 of an inch. And for all I know, Caleb had a reason for doing it that way. Below the insert, you're back to apricot, and I can imagine over the years, if you lean too much toward the toe, you might wear the apricot out, but you're less likely to wear out in front of the mouth because that's got the lignum, and I think that's going to take quite a few years to wear out unless you use this constantly. So, heavier, lighter. Caleb James.